my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion coming to you from Waco, Texas, but only for a short time. Jaw's gonna hang here for the day, and I'm gonna take off to go visit a friend in Austin, but I'm also gonna make a couple of vlogs while I'm there, and the main one that I really wanted to do was a filming location, Mike Judge, classic office space. Daze with Jordan the Lion. It begins right now. And I'd say you'll be entertained. I've left you enough things to work on here while I'm gone. Take care of yourself, Jaw. It's only gonna be a couple hours. All right, we've officially made it to Austin, Texas. Gonna do the classic Mike Judge film starring Ron Livingston and Jennifer Aniston. Office Space. And don't forget the classic appearance by Stephen Root. So let's go find our first filming location of the day. If that's okay with you two. This is Initech from Office Space. This is where you see Lumbergh drive his car in. You can even see the handicap space is still there. When Peter takes his spot right next to it to the left, right in between those two posts, right there. Lumbergh has to park in the handicap space right there. So cool. I love this movie. Obviously, it did not get burned down like the ending that we saw. But this movie came out when I was in high school, and it was definitely one of those things that I thought of was kind of like my ultimate fear of being an adult. They had an Initech sign when Peter is coming to work that you can kind of see angled right here. And you see where the wheelchair ramp is. They had covered that up with like some sort of metal design structure, but that's where everybody would enter. We see Peter walking through this yard to enter work. Like I said, I loved Mike Judge, and when I saw this movie, I was always just terrified that that would end up being my life, because you know, it's just one of those things, I guess you're always worried that when you become an adult, you won't find a job that keeps you motivated and that you'll just be stuck in something that you don't enjoy day after day. And that's basically what happens here. He has a job that he just doesn't like, and he eventually goes to a hypnotherapist that helps him let go. And so Peter literally lets go. He quits showing up to work. He doesn't show up for the overtime. When he is here, he doesn't do much, and so Initech is calling in some consultants to take a look at the business and decide who's going to stay and who's going to go. Now, everybody else in the office is doing their job, showing up and everything, but Pete doesn't. Pete has given up and just doesn't care, and so when he sits in front of the two Bobs who do this whole thing, he tells them, I'm just not motivated. I just don't care. I show up 15 minutes late to work and stare at my computer screen for about an hour. And he said, in fact, I would say I probably only do 15 minutes of actual real work. So they end up promoting him and firing all of his friends that work hard. So Pete tells his friends, you know, you guys shouldn't do this. You shouldn't be forced to work at a place like this that doesn't respect you and it's just going to replace you after a couple of years with somebody just starting out of the workforce. So he talks to them and finds out that his buddy Michael Bolton could come up with a software that steals a fraction of a cent from every transaction that goes through Initech into an account that he and his friends, Pete and his friends, can live off of. So that's basically what they plan on doing, is installing this program that steals that fraction of a cent. And so they do install it, and something goes wrong. A decimal point is in the wrong place or something, because within days they have over $300,000. So they get worried, and Pete decides he's going to turn himself in. So he writes a letter, slides it under Bill Lumbergh's door, the boss that everyone hates here, and walks away. So he thinks that they're all going to be in trouble. Actually, he's trying to take the fall for it, so he knows he's going to be in trouble. But to his surprise, when he shows up at work the next day thinking that they're going to arrest him or he's going to be fired and everything else, he shows up and this building has been set on fire. Because as we know, Milton The guy who's mumbling through the whole movie that they summarily dismissed and never told him, he keeps muttering under his breath that if they take his swing line stapler or move his desk one more time, he's gonna burn the place down. Goes in to take his swing line stapler back and ends up burning the place down. Milton ends up with the money. Pete's friends end up with a job at the competitor, Intertrode. And Pete ends up working for the demolition crew for this fire. So cool for me. I love this movie. I still think it's great. Mike Judge can do no wrong. And this was Initech. So it looks really similar to the way it did during filming, like I mentioned, other than not having that art piece that's covering the wheelchair lift. And there used to be like some kind of like bluish green beams that went across here. Those are gone, but everything else looks exactly the same. So if you remember at the beginning of the movie, Pete and all the guys go off to get a bite to eat because someone accuses Pete of having a case of the Mondays. When they come back from eating, Tom is looking all through the parking lot for these three guys to tell them what's going on, and they end up having a conversation right where we're going to show you next. Now, it would have been much, much greener at the time, but Tom flags them down walking through the parking lot and tells them that Initech has hired some consultants. And they say, so what? Big deal. And he goes, you know what consultants are? They bring consultants in here to make you interview for your job. Can you believe that? We have to sit down and actually interview for our job. He goes, what am I going to do if I get fired? Go stand in the state unemployment line with a bunch of scumbags? Tom is great in this. So we see the guys walking from over here, and they're walking down through here. You can see that building in the background over there, and you can see the cars are parked over here. Yep, right there. Tom is not wrong either, because Tom is one of the first that's fired. When they have him in that office, it's pretty funny because they say, so what do you do here? He goes, I take the specs from the customers to the engineers, so the engineers don't have to deal with the customers. He goes, so why can't the customers take the specs or their questions to the engineers? Because engineers aren't good at dealing with people. I'm a people person, damn it. What can you people understand? I take the specs from the customers to the engineers. He goes, so you physically take the specs from the customers to the engineer? Well, my secretary does. So what do you do here? What do you people not understand? So when they fire him, they say, yeah, Tom Spakowski, he's useless. He can go. So now we're heading to where the interiors of Tchotchkes was filmed. The exteriors were actually up in northern Austin, but we'll see that one as well. We have made it to the Baker Street Pub and Grill, a Sherlock Holmes themed pub. And even though the exteriors were different, our interiors, at the time this was a Cajun restaurant, which kind of explains the interiors. This was the inside of Tchotchkes. Let's go take a look. Well, it definitely looks a whole lot different. Completely different theme, but this is where Jennifer Aniston works in the movie. And she's supposed to wear all this flair on her uniform. So her boss, who is the actual writer and director, Mike Judge, he's the one that comes up and says, Joanna, you know, we require 16 pieces of flair. She said, well, I have 16. He goes, well, yeah, but we would like you to express yourself, if you would like, with more. So they don't have any of the bars or rails or anything anymore, but this was where it happened. I guess we can't be all that surprised after like 30 years or more that it doesn't look the same inside. But this is a really funny scene or place because she ends up eventually quitting because he says, well, we wanted you to express yourself. We thought you were going to express yourself. She said, you want me to express myself? Okay. And she flips him off and quits. So we saw the interior of Tchotchkes. This was the exterior where Jennifer Aniston works. This is where Pete and his buddies always end up going when they go for lunch or need to get away. They end up coming here to Tchotchkes. So here we have Dr. Swanson's office. This is the occupational hypnotherapist that Peter's girlfriend, Anne, who everyone is convinced is cheating on him, wants him to come to because he doesn't like his job. So right before this, we had seen Peter try and get out of work a little bit early because he knew Lumberg was going to ask him to work the weekend. And he does. He asks him to work Saturday and Sunday. So then we see this, and Peter is in here telling Dr. Swanson, he says, you know, I realized sitting at my cubicle today that every day since I started working, every day has been worse than the next. So that means every day that you see me is on the worst day of my life. And Dr. Swanson goes, so is today the worst day of your life too? He says, yeah. Dr. Swanson goes, wow, that's the best stuff. Peter goes, you know, is there any way you could just zonk me out so that I think I was fishing all day or something while I'm at work? And Doc Swanson says, that's not really what I do, but I think I can help you. So he tells him to relax and just to completely lose himself, close his eyes, and Doc Swanson starts counting down and says, when I count down to 1, all of your fears and inhibitions will all be gone. So he counts from 3 and 2, and as he's doing the 2, we see his hands start to like move and his eye starts to move. The doctor, like something's going wrong with him. And when he says 1, Peter falls into a hypnotic state of just complete happiness, and Doc Swanson falls and has a heart attack dead on the floor. Because the next scene we see is Peter asleep in his bed when he should be working his overtime on the weekend, and he's getting call after call from the office wanting to know where he's at, and then finally his girlfriend Anne calls and says, why are you home? You're supposed to be at work. He says, I didn't feel like going today. And she goes, what has gotten into you? You know, last night when Doc Swanson had the heart attack and you just sat there and did nothing and embarrassed me in front of all of my friends, and don't even blame it on the hypnosis because that's bull crap. And he just hangs up on her. And then she calls back and leaves a message and says, nobody hangs up on me. And by the way, I was cheating on you the whole time. So now our next locations take us to the northern part of Austin. So when they show going to Pete's apartment, they show the exterior of a building, and then they show the outside of his doors. 2 different places we're going to be showing you today. So they've changed the exterior just a little bit and the name a little bit, but this was where we would always see the exterior of Pete's apartment. See a car turning into here. Now let me take you off to where they actually showed where his apartment was. It's about 15 minutes away. So here we have our filming location for Lawrence and Pete's apartment. Pete would have been up there on the right, Lawrence on the left. Lawrence was Deidre Bader with the handlebar mustache. And that's where they can hear each other through the walls, and whenever Pete walks in, Lawrence yells from the other apartment, tells him things, and it's when he says he thinks that his girlfriend's cheating on him, and Lawrence goes, yeah, I know what you mean. And Peter also starts saying then, you know, what would you do, Lawrence, if you didn't have to work? Like, what if you had $1 million? What would you do? This is also when the guy comes to sell the magazine subscriptions and they're trying to figure out how to launder money. He comes to this front door and they let him in through that door. And now we're heading off to Tom's house. The guy with the O face says, hey, did you hear what happened to Tom? Pete goes, what? You mean him getting fired? No. What happened to him after he found out he was getting laid off? Let's go to that house. We're pretty close. This one's going to be a little tricky to do because you never really see the front of his house. You end up seeing everything around his house but his house. I'll explain. So this house right here was actually Tom's house. The only time you really see anything is when the front door is open, because the O-face guy is telling the story about how when Tom found out he was going to get fired or laid off, he decided he was going to kill himself by rolling down his car windows and running the gas in his garage. And then they say, but then that wife of his came home and caught him. She opens the garage door and Tom decides he wants to live. So he says, oh, that's okay, honey, I'm sorry, I was just testing something in here. He looks at her and he decides he wants to live. And then he comes backing out of this driveway and gets hit by a car right there. Now the way that you can tell this is it is because when you see a shot out of the driveway over here, you see a little bit of this house over here, and you see this house. But whenever, when Tom ends up having his barbecue and he invites everybody over, every time the front door opens, you see this house through the front door. So that's when they all come over for the barbecue, because Tom had got hit right here. So he's getting a 7-figure payout. And so he says he's developed his jump to conclusions mat that he had talked about earlier, and shows them the mat, and they're all kind of feeling uncomfortable. So check out the backyard here. So Tom's house is right there. You can see that he had his backyard barbecue right here, because you can see the big white tower thing in the background. And that's when the barbecue's happening, and the O-Face guy says that the girl that Pete brought has made her way around with other guys. And that's also when they're asking Tom's lawyer about minimum security prisons, and he says, well, they're not, you know, all white collar. He goes, I got a couple of clients that are in there, they say on the first day either beat up somebody or become someone's you know what. So there's Tom's house and the garage that he drives out of when he gets hit right here. Well, my friends, we're going to call it a day. I hope you enjoyed the filming locations today in Austin, Texas of Office Space. We will see you all next time. Have a great night and goodbye.